So I just watched the two trailers for this upcoming movie, The Odyssey. And of course, given the title of this video, it would seem as though I have the opinion that is rampant on the internet of this movie is going to suck. I think that there's a little bit more nuance than that, but as you can tell from the title of my video, I still would probably avoid this movie. I used to be someone that would go to theaters to watch movies pretty much on a weekly basis. I used to be a person that would try to catch the newest flick if it was something that I seemed like I had interest in. And, if this was me years ago, I probably would still go and watch The Odyssey, despite the criticism around it, because I think, given what I've watched on these two different trailers, I think that there's going to be some aspects of this product that is going to be very, very well done. Obviously, The Odyssey is directed by Christopher Nolan. It has a huge cast: Matt Damon, Anne Hathaway, Lupita Nyong'o, dozens of others that you could probably name. The movie's been getting clowned on a little bit on social media, and anyone who may have seen some of this, they might know what I'm talking about. And I think that the large consensus, it's going to be one of these culture war things, but there is something to this criticism that this movie is getting just based off the first two trailers that I think is very valid and is not just, right-wingers using cancel culture against something they don't like. And honestly, there's a little bit of truth there on it. So I was curious. I wanted to see what this movie would be like based off the two trailers that are on YouTube so far. I think that this movie Christopher Nolan is coming out with, I will say it up front, I really like the fact that the historical epic is kind of making a comeback with this movie. I really like Christopher Nolan's art style as a director, and I think that it actually fits The Odyssey really well. I think the lighting, the kind of washed out colors, the palettes that, Christopher Nolan is known for in his movies, I think that it works really well with this type of setting. In the trailers, there was still a lot of colors that popped out to me. You can see a lot of this with the greens I noticed in these two trailers that I just watched. I think that the cinematography is going to look really, really good in this movie. I think it's going to be a beautiful movie to watch. Yes, this is a pagan story. Hollywood making this kind of material based off of pagan folklore isn't anything new. And I think that this movie that Christopher Nolan is making is going to be entertaining to watch and well made in some regard. However, I think that there's going to be some major issues with this movie, and it is kind of apparent from the trailers as they are. And so that's the reason why I'm making this video. When it comes to film as an art form, I really think that there's so much you can do with this medium. And I really, really like when something that breaks the barriers of the art form. And there's been movies in the past that have really captured my attention that I still to this day would say has challenged, broken, exceeded the expectations of the art form, and Christopher Nolan himself is to be thanked for accomplishing some of that in his previous works. I love the Batman movies. I think, honestly, is the greatest three superhero movies that has ever been produced. Take off the Marvel, take off the other DC stuff, the Batman trilogy, The Dark Knight Rises, and of course Batman Begins, I kind of skipped the first one right away, are just fantastic to watch. I can't talk enough about the Dark Knight trilogy and just how good it was and how much life it breathed into that superhero franchise that, yeah, it kind of coasted on that, big success for years and years and never really accomplished the same high that the Dark Knight trilogy did based off these trailers I've seen with the Odyssey. I don't think that Christopher Nolan has lost an incredible amount of touch with this craft, but I think that Hollywood as a whole is becoming so incredibly tone deaf that I'm really struggling to see how I would pay money to watch this in a theater. Let's talk about the cast. This is like the most talked about thing I've seen on social media. And by social media, all I really mean is Facebook, because I deleted Twitter, I deleted Instagram. I have YouTube, which I think of more as a video sharing platform with social media aspects to it. But Facebook's the only real social media account I kind of have anymore. And so I see a lot of people on Facebook that are just dogging on this movie because of the cast. And it's worth bringing up because the cast is fascinating, to say the least. You have some really sensible, some really good choices here. Matt Damon as Odysseus, you have Anne Hathaway as Penelope. I think these two are good picks for your first two leads in this movie. You have John Bernthal in here. I think this actor would work great in a historical epic like The Odyssey. Charlize Theron works great. You have a lot of people that would fit into this timeline. Now, I'm just going to tell you this straight up. I can't sit here and put myself in the mind of whoever wrote The Odyssey. I'm sure that I could probably look it up. I just can't be bothered right now. But I can almost guarantee you the person that wrote The Odyssey wasn't envisioning a guy that looked like Travis Scott in the storyline. This is also a historical epic. It's a period piece, right? We have John Leguizamo in this movie. All I'm saying with the casting in this movie, certain choices are being made that is clearly to fill in diversity hire spots for the sake of looking progressive, having a cast that isn't too whitewashed, because in Hollywood, God forbid that we have too much white people in a movie. Once again, I really don't think the writers of the Odyssey were in their mind's eye putting Indian men in this storyline. That's all I'm going to say about that. I mean, something that I'm sure people understand, but for whatever reason are choose to be blissfully unaware of. Ancient Greek, the culture of the ancient Greeks was that of a makeup that was 90+% white, right? You can look at the ancient Greek statues and you can see that these people were observably European. That doesn't mean that they had only Europeans in the entire population, but their leadership was largely European. A lot of their philosophers and authors were largely European. I'm sure there's maybe a few, but I can't really think of any off the top of my head ancient Greek pieces of art that feature a number of people that aren't observably European, like how I'm looking at in this casting list right now. And I'm not even saying that you can't have any other ethnicities out there than people who are white or white adjacent. But there comes a point when you put the diversity in the cast, and I'm just, from what I'm looking at right here on the casting list and what I'm seeing in the trailers, there is a little bit too much diversity here that takes me out of the experience when I'm watching the trailers. And then on top of that, I saw this comment as well, and I didn't really think about it as I was watching the trailers, but I was like, this is extremely accurate. These guys are using like American English slang in dialogue in these trailers. Like Tom Holland, who plays Matt Damon's son in this movie, is talking about, oh, my dad this, my dad that. If this is supposed to be time period accurate, no one in the ancient Greek culture is referring to someone as their dad. They're referring to them as their father. Then I saw another clip of Matt Damon charging into battle or whatever, and he's like, "Let's go." I feel like Hollywood movies 30, 40 years ago, for all the valid criticisms you can give the industry back then, at least knew enough to make their historical epics sound and feel a lot more genuine than what I have seen so far in the Odyssey, these two trailers. And the thing is, when I'm watching these trailers, and I watch them both twice, basically, I can see that there's probably going to be at least a halfway decent product here. Christopher Nolan makes really good movies. Christopher Nolan is kind of a master at certain elements of the art form that is film. There's a reason why he's been around for so long. Not everything he makes is picture perfect and without flaw. I'll definitely grant you that. But a lot of his stuff that I've seen, I really, really like. Let me do a quick search. Right, so I did a quick search on all of his movies because, quite honestly, I just, if I was going to try to name them off the top of my head, I probably would have stumbled. I mentioned the Batman trilogy already. I really like that movie. I haven't seen The Following. I watched Memento. Memento is a really, really intelligent kind of movie. Like the first time I saw Memento, I was like, I don't know if I liked this, but I was like, there's something here. The second and third time I watched Memento, and I understood more about what the plot was doing, I'm like, this movie actually is really good, very well done. I've seen Insomnia. I watched it once. It was pretty good, but it wasn't something I ever came back to. But I remember, what's his name? Give me a second here. I'm having a hard time. Robin Williams. I don't know why, I can never remember Robin Williams' name. Like, I know the actor, the name to the face and everything like that. I know he has a lot of roles. It's one of the weirdest things. I just struggle so much with remembering that guy's name. Anyways, Insomnia, really good movie. Haven't come back to it. It was okay at the end of the day, and it was above average for sure. The Prestige, I've watched this movie 2 or 3 times. Very good. Very, very good movie. Hugh Jackman, Christian Bale, they are awesome in this movie. The ending is amazing. Interstellar, the first time I watched that movie, I was kind of like whatever with it. I knew it was good. The second time I watched it, I think I watched it 2 times front to back. The second time I watched it, I'm like, this movie is really good. There's a lot of things that are going on here that is just way more than what meets the eye at first. I watched Dunkirk, of course. I saw this one in the theaters. This one I wouldn't consider one of my favorites of his, but like in terms of spectacle, in terms of telling a story in a unique fashion, especially with the setting of World War I, Dunkirk is a really, really good watch in terms of just, what film can do as an art form in this medium. And like, at the end of the day, we're talking about Hollywood film slop. To be completely honest, I'm talking about how much I've enjoyed Hollywood slop in the past, decade, maybe 15 years of my life. I was chronically addicted to this nonsense for so much. However, I will stand by the idea that film as an art form can be really, really special. And, I don't know, I wouldn't expect everyone to necessarily agree with that, but when I see the wide range of different movies that are out there, some of them are just straight up terrible. And then you get stuff like The Dark Knight, which is a comic book Batman movie, but there is so much behind what you would imagine is actually going on there. Anyone that's watched The Dark Knight can probably understand what I'm saying. That movie works incredibly well as a Batman movie, but it also doesn't need the Batman setting to be a good movie. Christopher Nolan has a very good kind of, it's kind of weird because he does a very good job of writing characters but he kind of struggles to flesh out all the humanity in them. And so you get what feels like really sterile movies. This isn't to say that they're bad movies. I've just been talking about how much I like Christopher Nolan's products. I watched Oppenheimer in theaters. I thought it was an interesting movie. I didn't find it to be as good as it could have been, but it was, it was interesting. And I think, some of his stuff, like Oppenheimer, like Dunkirk, right? Good movies, they kind of struggle with fleshing out the humanity of certain characters. And I think that the Batman trilogy works so well because, it focuses on one man and the sacrifice he makes in order to save a community that he really cares about. That's basically the story of the 3 Batman movies, but it's done in a way that has everything else around it kind of adding to the overall theme rather than pulling away from it, right? That's something that a lot of movies kind of struggle with. And I think Christopher Nolan, I don't know how much input he has on the actual script on every one of these movies, but I think he has a knack for getting his hands on it, or at least influencing really strong scripts. I would say, even though I love the Batman trilogy and The Dark Knight is maybe one of my favorite movies ever, The Prestige actually might have the best script. You get the most human, feeling characters in The Prestige. I'll just comment on the other 2 that I haven't mentioned a bunch on yet. Inception, I think, is a really good popcorn flick that is actually his most shallow movie, despite it being maybe the most popular. I can see why it's popular. It has a lot of really good, tricks with the camera, and it does some really interesting combat or, fighting scenes and stuff like this, right? Inception is a good time, although there's not a lot. That's actually probably his most, definitely his most shallow movie compared to everything else out there. Tenet, I think I watched Tenet once, and I watched it in theaters. And my first impression was, this is confusing, but it's also really, really good. And I'd have to watch it again. I don't know if I will, but if I watch it again in the future, maybe I'd have a different opinion. I've seen Tenet get flack from people in terms of just like not making a lot of sense. And, there's something to be said about that, because there probably is a lot of plot holes in Tenet that Christopher Nolan does a really good job covering up. Interstellar has kind of the same issue where, like, the plot, if you really break down certain aspects of it, it just doesn't really make a lot of sense. But the movie as a whole is still a good piece of art, right? I feel that same way about Tenet, and I think I even like Tenet a little bit better than Interstellar the first time I watched it. In fact, I know I did. I don't know how well it will hold up compared to Interstellar, because my second and third viewing of Interstellar, I was like, this actually is much better than what I thought. The point is that this Odyssey movie, see, as a historical epic, I keep on looking at these trailers, and I keep on thinking about this cast, and I keep on thinking about Christopher Nolan, and he's got a lot of strengths as a director. He's also got some pretty obvious weaknesses as a director. I'm not sure if this movie's going to turn out to be good at all. Like, and that's, because I've already given this movie some praise. That doesn't mean that the whole movie's going to be unwatchable, or that the whole movie, there's going to be no art to appreciate here. But I'm going to be honest, I just can't be bothered to pay money to watch this thing in theaters. I might at some point in my living room if I really want to get critical about this. I don't know. I saw all this talk, all this dogging on the Odyssey movie. I decided I'm going to watch these trailers myself, kind of make my own opinion. And what I'm saying is that I can see the criticism, and the criticism is valid. I guess we'll have to wait and see if anyone cares to on how this movie is received with the public after it comes out. I don't think it's going to be good. I think that this is probably going to be his movie that is going to hold up the worst in the long run because of what it should be compared to what it probably will be. This isn't going to be Ben-Hur. I'm looking at these trailers right now. This thing, Ben-Hur is probably the most culturally impactful historical epic that's maybe ever been made. Not every movie or even not every historical epic is needing to be Ben-Hur, but this thing is going to come nowhere close. It's not even going to be on the radar, unless I'm wildly wrong. I don't know. That's mostly about it I got for this movie. What is Elliot Page doing in this thing? Why is Elliot Page playing Achilles? That's everything. Have a good one.